Here's what we know at this hour. It happened early this morning on New Orleans' bustling Bourbon Street. The FBI says a driver intentionally rammed a Ford pickup truck, which appears to be a rental, into crowds who were celebrating the new year. At least 15 people are dead. More than 30 others are hurt. The New Orleans police superintendent says the driver was, quote, hell-bent on creating carnage. The FBI identifying the suspect as 42-year-old Shamsud Dinjabar, a U.S. citizen from Texas and an Army veteran who was killed in a shootout with police. The agency also says an ISIS flag and other explosives were found in the truck. Agents are asking the public for help to find any other potential leads, and there have been various questions about whether there may be others who have been involved in this. Officials say their case is very active, and they still are clearing the crime scene tonight there. Let me go to Tom Yamas right now, who has been watching along with us from New Orleans. Tom, what's the status of things now?
Lester, good evening. Well, I want to show our viewers where this all happened. It happened just behind me there in the corner. The alleged terrorist drove his pickup truck right through here. He jumped the curb, getting around a police cruiser, and then hit Bourbon Street and went 3 blocks straight. His pickup truck was not his only weapon. He also had at least 1 firearm and also an explosive device. He drove for 3 blocks, Lester, and imagine this, 3 a.m., Bourbon Street, New Year's Day. It was packed with revelers. He killed at least 15 people so far. That number is expected to grow, possibly because several people right now are fighting for their lives inside of New Orleans hospitals. When he crashes his car into a crane on Conti Street, again, which is 3 blocks up, he gets out and he gets into a shootout with police. Police were able to shoot and kill him, and that's where the investigation has begun from here. There are still some major questions, including why did he pick New Orleans? Why New Year's Day? One reason might be the massive crowds that come here on any night to have a great time on Bourbon Street, but also because the Sugar Bowl just behind me is the Superdome over there, and the Sugar Bowl is one of the biggest college football games around, Lester, as you know. It was set to take place. It's going to be postponed now, but there were those huge Sugar Bowl crowds rooting on the University of Georgia and Notre Dame in town for the big game as well, and the alleged terrorists might thought this would have been a good target. The other big question people are asking, why were there no barriers? Behind me here on Bourbon Street, there should be what are known as bollards. They're essentially metal poles, if you will, and they stop cars from going inside. Well, they were redoing all of them for the Super Bowl, and I've been told by sources close to the projects that were ongoing here in New Orleans to replace those bollards that there was a rush. They wanted to fast track this project to get those bollards up before the Super Bowl, which is just about a month away, a little over a month away here in New Orleans, and that the work was being done very quickly. Because it was being done very quickly, they removed all the bollards on Bourbon Street. So essentially, the alleged terrorist, when he came through here, he got around that squad car. He had free reign to go all the way down Bourbon Street, really with not a lot stopping him, and that's why he was able to go at least 3 blocks. Those questions are being asked right now, Lester, and a lot of people here in New Orleans just shaken to their core. Not only people who live in New Orleans, they love New Orleans, but also all the people that are in town, the tourists that came here to celebrate New Year's Day and college football and got a much different experience, Lester.
And Tom, as you know, there has been a lot of questions about a possible motive here. There was a flag that was hitched to a trailer, if I understand, an ISIS flag. Have officials gone further to discuss what they think might be a specific motive in this case?
You know, I will say this, Lester. The investigation, obviously, as you know, is very fluid. They have reported that ISIS flag was on the back of the pickup truck. You can see that in some of the images that have been taken of the white pickup truck. It looks like he had a large pole with the black flag attached to the back of that pickup truck on that pole. You can see it right here. It's in the center of the bed right there. And so that's one of the things, obviously, the FBI that's now leading the investigation is going to be looking at. The other thing that is interesting in this case, we're talking about a U.S. citizen who is also an Army veteran, right? We understand now he had a career in the Army. He served in Afghanistan in both human resources and IT capacities. He was also a realtor and a property manager in Texas before this all happened. So there's a lot of questions on when did he become radicalized, what was the motive here, why he chose New Orleans, and was he indeed working with ISIS? And also the big question, Lester, and this has been going back and forth, were there others who had helped him? The FBI initially had said they were looking for co-conspirators. That might be changing, but it's still very fresh in the investigation, Lester.
All right, Tom Yamas, thanks very much. Again, we're standing by. We expect to hear remarks at any moment by President Biden, who will be making his first public comments about this horrible tragedy. Let me go to Jesse Kirsch, who is also in New Orleans and gathering on this story as well. Jesse, what can you report?
Yeah, so Lester, we are just outside of the Superdome, which is set to host the Sugar Bowl, part of the college football playoff tomorrow, and then the Super Bowl. And as you can see, they have added further barriers along the border here tonight in a city that has a lot of questions facing it as far as security preparations ahead of New Year's Eve.
Hours after that bloody attack on Bourbon Street, tonight growing questions about the physical barriers used to secure the area. Devices known as bollards, typically short stainless steel posts, are often used in high-profile parts of cities and towns to help control crowds and vehicles. But early this morning on Bourbon Street, the bollards weren't there. New Orleans' mayor explained today that the system was in the midst of repairs.
Bollards were not up because they are near completion, with the expectation of being completed, of course, by Super Bowl.
The game set to be played in New Orleans next month. The superintendent of police says other barriers like police vehicles and officers were in place to secure Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. But video shows how the attacker drove right around a patrol car.
So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorist defeated it.
Anything that is currently in the midst of being repaired had a backup replacement for last night.
Vehicles and officers were there where all of those ballasts have been. We had that. We knew. So we did have it. And like I said, in this particular case, terrorists just went all the way around up onto the sidewalk.
Was someone getting up on a sidewalk considered impossible or nearly impossible, or was this not something you expected you would have to account for?
Yes, of course, it wasn't something we expected to account for.
New Orleans, the latest high-profile deadly ramming attack following the German Christmas market attack last month, the Berlin truck attack in 2016, and the one in Nice, France that same year. Jose Liris was visiting New Orleans and left the area just before the attack this morning.
The metal barricades were not up, just the standard plastic ones like you see there. There was police there at the entrance, a lot of police there, but the metal barricades were not up.
A city website showing what the new bollards may look like says the project is set to be completed next month. But a nationally televised college football playoff game is supposed to be played here tomorrow night. New Orleans City Council member Helena Moreno says the city is ready.
Do you think New Orleans can host a football game here this week safely?
I'm going to tell you this, that right now so many resources are being deployed down to the city of New Orleans that no doubt about it, we will host a safe game tomorrow. Everything from federal resources, state resources, additional intelligence, like you name it. It's like that's all happening.
And Jesse, again, joining us live from New Orleans. We understand the concern about these bollards and that they weren't in place for this attack. But is there any indication that the attacker was aware that had potentially cased the area before the attack?
At this point, Lester, we haven't seen anything from officials about potential other targets in the city of New Orleans. But what I can tell you is something that would potentially be a prime target in the city this week and also next month is where I am right now. This is the Superdome. It is supposed to host a football game. It was supposed to host it tonight in just a matter of a couple of hours, but that was postponed because of the events in the early morning hours. They have delayed the game till tomorrow. The Super Bowl is also supposed to be played here next month. And what I can tell you has changed here throughout the day. You can see all the flashing police lights. That presence has been here pretty much throughout the afternoon. But what is new in the last couple hours is these barricades. There were some of them down there, but they've extended them down the block throughout the afternoon, Lester.
All right, Jesse Kirsch will ask you to stand by. This deadly attack in New Orleans comes after months of FBI warnings that terror threats are on the rise in the U.S. Now, federal authorities are ramping up security ahead of some major events going on this month. Our Gabe Gutierrez joins us live with that. Gabe, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. Well, as you mentioned, we're waiting to hear from President Biden in just a short time, acting in his role not just as commander-in-chief, but consoler-in-chief. But as you mentioned, federal authorities have been on high alert for some time.
Tonight, the nation's capital is under heightened security out of what police say is an abundance of caution, though there is no specific threat. With a slew of major security events this month in D.C., the January 6th anniversary, former President Carter's funeral, and the inauguration of President-elect Trump, Federal authorities are on high alert.
Well, the reaction was one of anger and frustration.
While investigators have not yet determined a motive in the New Orleans attack, they say the suspect had an ISIS flag on his truck as he carried it out. There are also mounting questions about the Las Vegas explosion outside a Trump hotel. And in a sign of the growing danger, experts say the number of domestic terrorist attacks and plots against government targets alone motivated by political beliefs in the past 5 years was nearly triple the previous 25 years combined. The FBI has also been warning the threat from homegrown violent extremists that are jihadist-inspired is surging.
Since October 7th, though, that threat has gone to a whole nother level.
Add to that the unprecedented 2 assassination attempts this summer on then-candidate Trump.
Today, President-elect Trump, who's here at Mar-a-Lago, commenting on the New Orleans attack in a social media post, praising the officers involved and pledging that his administration would fully support the city of New Orleans. Lester?
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. I spoke with Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill a short time ago. I began by asking if there is an active manhunt underway.
Well, there certainly is continuing to be an active investigation so that we can identify just how many additional individuals were involved. But I can tell you with some certainty that there are multiple individuals who are involved.
There has been some reporting that there may have been individuals who were handling or placing IEDs, explosive devices. Can you confirm that?
Yes, and there was a house fire in New Orleans this morning that was connected to this event where we believe the IEDs were being made.
So you have a location where you believe the IEDs were being manufactured?
We do. It was an Airbnb, so we know that these individuals had rented the house, were using it for that purpose, and then the other events unfolded early this morning.
Under the circumstances, there might be others out there. Is it wise to go forward with the football game, the Sugar Bowl, even a day later?
You know, not my decision, but I would like to see it delayed at least another day. If they asked my opinion, I would tell them that. I think that it was a wise decision to delay it at least a day. This is an active crime scene, and, you know, they just finished removing some of the bodies, and they still haven't removed all of them. I still think that we probably need to wait an extra day.
Is there a further threat to the community?
No, I believe that the community is safe, and there certainly are a lot of there's a huge law enforcement presence here in New Orleans. I believe that everyone is safe, and the governor plans to attend the football game.
Do you believe there will be full accountability for lapses in physical barriers or proper physical barriers at the crime scene?
Yes, I think that, you know, absolutely there's going to be an after-action analysis of any failures that occurred and anything that could have been done and wasn't done to secure that area. And if there's any lapses, then it will be fixed.
Attorney General Murrill, we thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Lester.
And more now on the deadly attack in New Orleans. Tom Winter, our law enforcement and intelligence correspondent, joins us now. Tom, what will authorities be doing to investigate there whether there were co-conspirators involved in this?
Well, just to follow up on that interview that you did there, Lester, with the Attorney General, that Airbnb that we see there in New Orleans is certainly a focus. Were there any individuals that were coming in and out of that Airbnb? Can they get any sort of video from that location? And what about the IEDs? If he was making these improvised or homemade explosive devices there, how was he making them? What was the technical capability of them? Were they remote detonated? Did they have the ability to set them off? Or others going to set them off? Who was coming in and out of that house, if anybody? That's going to be a focus. So that's column A. Column B is specifically those particular improvised explosive devices that were not found in the car, but were nearby this scene on Bourbon Street or near Bourbon Street. We are told that initially the FBI was looking at several individuals who were seen near them. They've since wrapped up that investigation, or at least that avenue, and it appears that they are not connected with placing these suspected devices there. So it is still possible overall, Lester, when you look at this investigation, investigation that this individual did in fact act alone, but it's just far too soon to say. And one of the things that they're looking at is, how did this individual become radicalized? In other words, how did he get to a point where he believed in what ISIS was saying, to put that flag on the back of that pickup truck and drive through this crowd and killing these 15 people? How did he get to that point? One thing that they're looking at there is his travel, specifically some travel that took place in late June, early July of 2023, where he apparently flew from New York's JFK airport to Cairo, Egypt. So they're trying to determine, did he actually get on that plane? Was it in fact him in that trip? What occurred when he went overseas? Did that have any connection to what ultimately became this deadly terror attack? And then apparently once he comes back here, Lester, he flies from Atlanta to Toronto several days later and then comes back here to the U.S. Again, does that have any connection to what we've seen here? So that type of work is going to be ongoing. The FBI is going to be involved with foreign government agencies, foreign law enforcement agencies, to try and determine who he was maybe meeting with overseas, or did it have nothing to do with this at all. It's just part of the work that's going to be ongoing. Closer to home here, Lester, in Houston, the FBI says that they are at a location there where they're conducting some law enforcement activity. That's their words for saying that at some point they're going to be conducting some searches, because we know that this individual is from there, and presumably they're going to be interviewing neighbors, any sort of landlords, anybody that might be connected to this in any sort of way, to figure out who is this person and where did things go so terribly wrong.
Okay, Tom Winter, part of our special coverage as we continue here this evening. We're going to turn now to another deadly incident being investigated as a possible act of terrorism. A Tesla Cybertruck exploding outside the Trump International Hotel, leaving the driver dead and injuring 7 more. And Morgan Chesky is there for us tonight with the latest.
Lester, that's right, we are. In fact, 3 law enforcement officials briefed on this matter say it's now being investigated as a potential act of terrorism. All of this happening amid growing evidence that this deadly fire was not an accident. Growing questions tonight into this Tesla Cybertruck turned inferno just feet away from the Trump International Hotel. The stunning scene on the Vegas Strip, now the focus of a federal investigation. Law enforcement officials confirming the Cybertruck was rented from the same company as the vehicle used in the New Orleans attack.
We're looking for secondary devices. We're taking it slow, and we are going to make sure that we remain safe in our community.
The blaze, called in around 8:40 this morning, appeared to erupt in seconds. Witnesses describing hearing a loud noise, followed by a smoky scene.
We saw a lot of smoke through the windows.
Inside the vehicle, fire crews discovered an unidentified body. The burst of flames also wounding at least 7 bystanders before it was fully contained. Tesla founder Elon Musk posting, "The whole Tesla senior team is investigating this matter right now," adding, "We've never seen anything like this." Retired ATF agent Scott Sweeto says video evidence may be telling in the investigation.
You can see multiple large flashes, and you also hear whistling sounds in that video, and those whistling sounds are very consistent with the sort of fireworks that you could buy as a consumer and set off.
Tonight, the Trump Organization thanking law enforcement for their swift response as federal investigators dig in. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Las Vegas.
And let me go back to Tom Winter now. And Tom, I want to pick up now on this story breaking as we were watching all the events in New Orleans, this story breaking in Las Vegas today. Where do we stand as to whether this is related, this is parallel, coincidental? Where do we stand?
Well, it sure seems like an awful big coincidence when we consider that the vehicles in both instances were apparently rented from the same company, which is kind of like an Airbnb or a VRBO, but for cars, Lester. We are told, however, at this moment that federal investigators have not found any sort of connection between the two. You know, it's important to note when we look at the incident in Las Vegas, Donald Trump, obviously president-elect, everybody knows who he is. Cybertruck, Tesla, Elon Musk, huge part of the incoming Trump administration. Even without that, he's a huge entrepreneur in this country, somebody who's a bit of a lightning rod himself. So did this person carry this out in an effort to make a statement against either one of those individuals or both? Or did they just know that I'm going to get a lot of attention by showing up at this Trump property in a Cybertruck and doing something? These are all part of the questions that federal investigators are asking. The FBI has not officially taken over this investigation at this point, Lester, we're told, but we do expect that it is headed towards that direction. And where this ultimately goes, time will tell, and also how this potential explosive was put together in the back of the truck. You heard the fireworks in Morgan's package, but we'll have to figure out exactly what was used and how that was all put together. That's something that investigators are very much going to want to figure out, and what this person was specifically trying to do here today. Obviously, 7 others injured as a result of this, so it is significant and certainly got everybody's attention in Las Vegas today.
And Tom, let me ask you, we know from history that terror attacks change things. You know, we don't carry bottles of water on airplanes because of a terror threat. The Murrow building bombing in Oklahoma all those years ago, that was the beginning of the use of these bollards around high-profile buildings. What could change as a result of these 2 incidences?
I think we've seen some incidents that have taken place outside of New York or Los Angeles, some of the major cities that have had experience with terrorist attacks, or at least have that at the forefront when we consider these large-scale events that go on in this country. And so I think for these other cities that don't think that maybe it'll happen there, or it's not necessarily the priority when you consider fighting local crime or various local issues that need to be handled, that this is something that can happen anywhere. The internet is such a megaphone for these terrorist organizations or various ideologies that people hear that call or are directed in that call, and from there want to carry out an attack. I think a lot of cities are going to have to look at the fact that they're going to have to look a lot more like New York City or some other major metropolitan areas from a standpoint of physical security. Keep the threat back from the buildings, keep people away from being able to conduct this type of attack. And whether you're doing renovations or not, one thing that was done in New York City last night to prevent this exact type of incident is the parking of sanitation trucks. That's not a high-tech way of fighting terrorism. It's taking a large dump trucks and putting sand in them. But when you set those up on streets and on sidewalks and create real, true physical barriers for somebody to do something, it tends to ward off somebody doing it in the first place, Lester.
All right, Tom Winter, we'll ask you to stand by as we continue our expanded coverage of the terror attack and the reaction. And as we reported, the Sugar Bowl kickoff that was set for tonight in New Orleans has been postponed until tomorrow. Our David Noriega now on how the college bowls are stepping up security after today's deadly attack.
Tonight, police on high alert at major New Year's Day events across the country. In California, the Rose Parade kicking off just hours after the devastating attack in New Orleans, tinging this celebration with a sense of unease.
I feel here, though, the security is pretty well beefed up in a sense, but New Orleans, I'm concerned.
With more than 1,000 law enforcement officers on scene to protect a crowd that could reach 1 million.
We also have undercover personnel that are walking a parade route. We have technology in place to sense even bioterrorism events should that occur.
A similar heavy police presence across the country. Ahead of tonight's Peach Bowl game, Atlanta police promising added precautions and deploying specialized units and additional personnel. The Philadelphia PD is closely monitoring areas throughout the city, including the Mummers Parade. Less than 2 weeks ago, a similar scene in Magdeburg, Germany, leaving 5 dead and hundreds injured after a man drove through a Christmas market.
With an event of this scale, where you have close to 1 million people gathered in a dense urban area, even if law enforcement does everything in their power, they can't account for every conceivable scenario.
Security can only do so much. You have to really look at where the biggest crowd and the most vulnerability is going to be. You want to put all your resources and assets, because that's the worst catastrophic event.
Despite the uncertainty, officials saying this year's Rose Parade saw the biggest crowd since the pandemic.
I hate to say this, but it kind of seems like it's out of our control. But yeah, I mean, you can't stop living your life.
A resolution for the new year after a tragedy that's become all too familiar. David Noriega, NBC News.
NBC's Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. Ken, we have heard mixed reports about how many people were involved in the New Orleans attack. Take us through your latest reporting on that question.
Well, Lester, it's important to say that the picture is muddled, and the FBI hasn't come to a definitive conclusion either way, as you heard Tom Winter say before. It's possible that this person acted alone. It's also possible there were co-conspirators. But what we do know is that the definitive statements that were made by the FBI's special agent in charge and other officials at that news conference earlier today appear to have been based on a misunderstanding of surveillance video. They were looking at video that they thought may have shown other people, not the dead suspect, planting those 2 IEDs in the city of New Orleans. They ran that lead down, and they have now ruled those people out as suspects, we are told. They were innocent. They were not involved. And that was largely the basis for those officials saying that there were other co-conspirators out there that they were looking for. So right now, there is no manhunt. There is no active search for other suspects. They're not ruling out that this person worked with other people or was in touch with others online, but there's no definitive evidence, as far as we understand, of other people. But yet, it's early in the investigation, and they still need to go through all of this suspect's travel records and digital history to find out who he was communicating with, and if he was using encryption, that would complicate their efforts. So it's really hard to say anything definitive other than they went down a rabbit trail that turned out not to suggest what they thought it did, Lester.
And Ken, I think a lot of us did a double take when we saw that flag affixed to the trailer hitch on that vehicle. It was what appeared to be an ISIS flag. It's now been confirmed as such. What does this tell us about the state of ISIS as we launch into 2025?
Well, look, the FBI director and others, Lester, have been saying for some time that the threat from ISIS-inspired terror attacks is greater than it's been in a long time, particularly post-October 7th, in light of the controversy over the war in Gaza and people being inflamed across the Middle East about that. You also have a situation where political violence in the United States is increasingly a risk, and more people are turning to extremist ideologies, whether it's ISIS or whether it's people who don't like healthcare executives or whether it's far-right extremism. So you have a confluence of risk factors here, but what counterterrorism officials are saying is they are very concerned. A few years ago, they were telling us that the threat from Islamic-inspired terrorism had greatly diminished, and that was true. And remember, of course, they defeated the ISIS caliphate in the Middle East. But the movement is not dead. It's out there, and it's online, and radicalized individuals in the United States are susceptible to being inspired by it, and that's what appears to have happened here, although we need to learn more about exactly this man's path to radicalization. But here you had a person born in the United States, spent years in the U.S. Army, and ends up flying an ISIS flag and killing multiple people in a horrific terrorist attack, Lester.
All right, Ken, thanks. We are standing by to hear from the President of the United States, President Biden, to approach the podium momentarily. Let me go to Gabe Gutierrez as we await the President. Gabe, this will be the first time we've heard the President today on this.
Yes, this will be his first lengthy public remarks. The president did speak very briefly to reporters on the tarmac a little bit earlier today, where he declined to answer most questions about the status of the investigation. He was heading from Wilmington, Delaware to Camp David. Now, the White House says that the president has been briefed continuously throughout the day. He's been speaking quite a bit with top officials at the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. We also heard earlier today that the president did speak with the mayor of New Orleans and pledged the full federal support to the city of New Orleans. Now, Lester, this comes just 19 days before the end of his presidency. As you know, he has the role not just of commander-in-chief, but consoler-in-chief. So we expect him to strike that reassuring tone in these remarks, which are expected to just last a few minutes. Again, he's at Camp David today after ringing in the New Year's holiday in Wilmington, Delaware, Lester.
And we should note that the FBI quickly took over the investigation. Federal local authorities in New Orleans ceded this to the federal partners in this case, owing to the importance of it and the possibility of international or state lines being crossed in the preparation of this attack. We'll find out about that. But here comes the president right now, approaching the podium again in his home in Delaware.
I know I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who are killed, to all those who are injured, to all the people of New Orleans, who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you. We're going to stand with you as you mourn and as you heal in the weeks to come. I want to thank our brave first responders and law enforcement personnel who stopped the attacker in his tracks before he could kill or injure even more people. And I want to thank you to everyone at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, for working nonstop to investigate this heinous act. The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, and whether there was any continuing threat to public safety. Here's what we know so far. The FBI has reported to me the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, excuse me, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators. We have nothing additional to report at this time. The investigation is continuing to be active, and no one should jump to conclusions. I've directed my Attorney General, the FBI Director, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, and the intelligence community to work on this intensively until we have a full and complete information. And once we have that information, I will share that information as soon as we can confirm it. Additionally, we're tracking the explosion of a cyber truck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Law enforcement and the intelligence community are investigating this as well, including whether there's any possible connection with the attack in New Orleans. Thus far, there's nothing to report on that score at this time. I directed my team to make sure every resource is made available to federal, state, and local law enforcement to complete the investigation in New Orleans quickly and to make sure there's no remaining threat to the American people. And we'll support the people of New Orleans as they begin the hard work of healing. New Orleans is a place unlike any other place in the world. It's a city full of charm and joy. So many people around the world love New Orleans because of its history, its culture, and above all, its people. So I know, while this person committed a terrible assault on the city, the spirit of our New Orleans will never, never, never be defeated. It always will shine forth. We've seen that time and time again throughout its history, and I know we'll see it again in the days and weeks ahead. May God bless the people of New Orleans. May God bless our police and our first responders. May God protect our troops, and we'll keep you fully contemporaneously informed. Thank you.
Have you spoken to President Trump? Are you concerned about more attacks? Have you spoken to President Trump?
President Biden taking no questions, but several minutes long statement offering his condolences and sharing the grief with the families and those who were injured in this attack. Also making a little news, or at least keeping us up to date on some news, including the continued examination as to whether there's any connection between what happened in New Orleans and the explosion of a cyber truck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. He's promised to keep us up to date on that. He also notably noted some posted videos by the suspect in the New Orleans attack talking about how he was inspired by ISIS. Again, the ISIS flag was found attached to the bed of the pickup truck that he had used to run down so many people. I want to go to Tom Yamas. Tom remains on the ground for us there in New Orleans. Tom, what more can you tell us and update us on the story?
I've already done
Well, Lester, I've happened to meet two eyewitnesses who were there exactly when this whole thing went down, and their stories are horrific. This is Jimmy, remind me your last name, Jimmy? Gothran. Jimmy Gothran and Alex Berth Mitchell. Yes, they're locals here in New Orleans. They were out having a great time last night, New Year's Day, New Year's Eve on Bourbon Street. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you. Start from the beginning. What do you remember when you noticed something was wrong?
Everything. I was the designated driver, so we're coming South Bourbon towards Canal. We seen just a large crowd up in front. We decided to duck back off into the club just to not have to deal with that. By the time we walked in the club, maybe a minute or two passed, we seen 5 frantic females run in, ducking under tables, just kind of acting crazy. And knowing, living here, kind of what things are going on, we figured something was up. I knew there was a balcony. I told him, let's go. So we run upstairs to have better protection and just to better ourselves. And when we got out there, the scenes, unreal, movie prop type bodies, just mangled, and everyone had disappeared. It was dead silence. You could hear a pin drop.
And you were telling me that when you look down Bourbon Street, you look all the way down the path the terrorists took, there were no barriers. He essentially had a free pass to go down Bourbon Street as fast as he wanted.
100%, 10 blocks. You couldn't even see him anymore. That's how clear.
He even went around the cop car that was blocked to the street.
That was right here. This is where it started, and you guys were about a block up. So you were right at the beginning of when this happened.
Yes, the first.
How many people were in the street, would you say?
Hundreds.
The streets were packed.
Packed, like shoulder to shoulder. That's why we got off the street for a minute to let it spread out.
So he comes with a pickup truck full speed right through Bourbon. And I know you guys were close to some of the victims in this case, and I don't want to get too graphic, but you said in some cases the people that were injured, there were actual tire marks on them?
Yeah, the gentleman directly below me to the right of a lot of that footage, he had tire marks on his back. Whenever they rolled him over, he had tire marks on the front. You could clearly see he was crushed. And then the 27-year-old mother they identified earlier, she, there was 6 deceased visually, instantly. Yeah. Like, not to be too graphic, but brains,
blood.
It felt like a war zone.
Yeah.
It was like a war zone, Alex?
It felt like a war zone. It felt like you all outside. There was bodies left, bodies right. We couldn't leave. The first thing you're thinking of is, I got to get out of here. I've got to escape. What if they keep shooting? You know something's still going on. And we're well aware of how to escape situations, and they want to lock you in the club, but that's the last place I wanted to be. Loud music and flashing lights. I'm just trying to find somewhere safe to escape, and you can't.
Could you hear the gunfire by the end of it? Did you guys hear the exchange,
with all
the shootout?
All the panic and the hollering.
He had flown so far down.
Yeah.
He was so far past you by that point, you couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
All we heard was sirens.
And then the green tactical unit officers were, at least 10 of them, patrolling, guns ready, on foot, straight down Bourbon, bypassing the bodies, weaving through.
I'm sorry you guys had to go through this. I'm sorry you had to go through this on New Year's Day. It's just a terrible thing in your city. Lester, I'm going to send it back to you. Just 2 of the stories of what happened last night.
Yeah, it's hard to hear, Tom, but it certainly gives us a fuller picture of what New Orleans and this country has suffered. We want to take you to Las Vegas right now. Another news conference, this on what may be a separate issue. We don't know for sure. It's the cyber truck explosion outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. The chief now giving us a briefing.
And that changed this morning at about 8:40 when a 2024 Tesla Cybertruck pulled into the area, a valet of the Trump International Hotel. Very quickly thereafter that, the driver, who was the sole occupant of the truck, we saw what looked like maybe some sort of smoke, and then the truck exploded. Smoke was coming from inside of the truck after we noticed the flash and the explosion, and I'm going to show you that first video. That's the Cybertruck parked right in front of the doors. Can you play that again, Carlos? So the individual that was in that truck is obviously deceased, still in the truck as we speak here today. Our fire department folks, Engine 12, a number of others, you'll hear from one of the fire chiefs here in just a moment, arrived very quickly along with my officers And obviously we knew that we had a much larger event than just a vehicle fire. And so there's going to be a drone video that plays to my left again. You'll see as the fire initially, they covered it with the tarp to try to get it to go out. Once the fire went out through the suppression efforts of the fire department, you'll see some of the evidence in the back of the vehicle. So those are gasoline canisters. They are camp fuel canisters and large firework mortars. What I also would like you to pay attention to on that video, as you see that, it looks like the exterior of that truck is completely intact as it sits there. The fact that this was a cyber truck really limited the damage that occurred inside of the valet, because it had most of the blast go up through the truck and out. In fact, if you look on that video, you'll see that the front glass doors at the Trump hotel were not even broken by that blast, which they were parked directly in front of. You can see that in the video there. What I will update, I'm very well aware that there's a name already been reported out into the media. I am not going to confirm any names to you as I sit here today, because I cannot do that with 100% certainty of who the individual is. What I can tell you is we do know the truck was rented in Colorado. We were able to trace that truck through the Tesla charging stations, and it arrived here in Las Vegas this morning at about 7:30 and went up and down Las Vegas Boulevard before immediately pulling into the Trump Towers. Unfortunately, there were 7 people that reported injuries during this incident. All of them still remain as minor injuries and were treated at UMC. I would like to thank the Resorts World, because as you know, we had to close down the Trump and evacuate it, as well as the Fashion Show Mall. And the Resorts World was very gracious in taking those hundreds of individuals in over there, housing them and feeding them prior to us being able to completely clear the hotel. The hotel and Fashion Show are back open for business. The Trump will remain closed as we continue this lengthy investigation as we move forward. I'm going to yield now to Chief Billy Samuels, but I'd like you to also recognize all of our exceptional elected officials that have come to support the police and the fire department and this community in remaining safe. There is no further threat to the community as I sit here today, and I just want to make sure that our community understands we believe this to be an isolated incident, and it is now over as far as the danger. So, Billy?
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to reiterate some of the stuff that the Sheriff has spoken upon. Engine 12 did arrive within 4 minutes of dispatch, did extinguish the fire with assistance from the sprinkler systems, and along with that electric vehicle blanket that we use on those operations. We did encounter 7 victims, all stable. 2 of them were transported to UMC, who have since been released. They were transported by community ambulance. A total of 13 units from Clark County Fire with 26 personnel, and then 4 units and 17 personnel from Las Vegas Fire and Rescue assisted with this operation. We always do appreciate the support that we get from our hotel partners, as the Sheriff was mentioning with Resorts World. RTC did lend us 10 buses so we can refuge the people that were evacuated from the Trump Tower. Community Ambulance for their transportation for us, Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, and Nevada Division of Emergency Management. And we do appreciate their support, so we can't do that without them. And like the Sheriff said, last night was a huge success, but we are prepared for whatever comes our way. So thank you for that. And I will turn this over to Special Agent in Charge, Jeremy Schwartz.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Schwartz. I'm currently the Acting Special Agent in Charge for the FBI here in Las Vegas. The FBI is currently conducting an investigation on a vehicle explosion, as the Sheriff had just shown you a little bit ago. That's being conducted through our JTTF, which is a Joint Terrorism Task Force. I want to make sure everybody understands that the task force is comprised of law enforcement officials from the entire valley here. We're not doing anything alone, and we wouldn't do anything alone without our partners making sure that we're all in lockstep. We've learned from mistakes in the past, and we're not going to do that again. We have a great relationship with our law enforcement partners, and we're going to continue to do so. As of right now, our number one goal is to ensure that we have the proper identification of the subject involved in this incident. Following that, our second objective is to determine whether this was an act of terrorism or not. I know everybody's interested in that word and trying to see if we can say, hey, this is a terrorist attack. That is our goal, and that's what we're trying to do. We have a ton of resources dedicated to this right now, and again, we're doing it with our partners. We're doing it together, jointly, and we'll continue to do so until we figure out exactly what's going on. I think most importantly, as the sheriff already mentioned, we believe this is an isolated incident. We do not believe that there's a bunch of folks out there supporting this or helping this, and we don't believe that there's any other danger to the community right now. But again, over the next few hours and days, we will continue to do our best to research that as much as we can and get to the bottom of this, and we won't stop until we're 100% certain as to what happened and why. Thank you.
So I just want to clarify again so that I don't get these questions. We do know who rented the truck. We are looking at that individual, but I am not prepared to release the name of any of the individuals that we are looking at least until next of kin is notified and we have a 100% identification. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have. I can't see. Hi, Dana.
Do you think it's a coincidence that there were these kinds of incidents on the same day, basically, in two tourism capitals?
Do I think it's a coincidence? I don't know, but what I can tell you is we're absolutely investigating any connectivity to what happened in New Orleans, as well as other attacks that have been occurring around the world. We're not ruling anything out yet, Dana.
Sure. Is there any possibility that this had a link to ISIS? There have been suggestions that the New Orleans attack might have.
Yeah, so the question is there any links to ISIS? And I will tell you that we don't have any indication of that here in Las Vegas. No overt ISIS flag as was seen in New Orleans. But again, we are investigating every aspect of this, and if that comes to light, we'll certainly update you. I'm sorry, sir.
What was the time between the truck's arrival and the explosion?
About 1 hour was the amount of time between the arrival of the truck here in Las Vegas, or at least our first notification of the arrival, and the explosion that occurred at the tower.
How long were you in the porte-cochere before the explosion?
It was only there for about, it was sitting in the porte-cochere for about 15 seconds before it exploded.
Have you all found
Was that 15? Where'd Dory go? The 15 to 20 seconds, I just want to make sure I gave you the right info.
connection of the Elon Musk, Tesla, Donald Trump connection to be interesting from an investigative perspective?
Well, I mean, it's a Tesla truck, and we know that Elon Musk is working with President-elect Trump, and it's the Trump Tower, so there's obviously things to be concerned about there, and that's something we continue to look at.
Have you all found re-examine security procedures at hotels?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question. Do we need to re-examine security procedures? You know, we were very successful in the night before. I'm surprised this happened, to be quite frank with you, and that's certainly something we're going to have to look at in target hardening, what that looks like. But to your question, Dana, I did forget to mention that I have authorized what we call an ABX roster to continue for the next 2 days, which is my New Year's Eve staffing plan of over 1,000 officers, both in our community neighborhoods as well as on the Strip and downtown, in partnership with all of the other law enforcement agencies, City of Las Vegas Marshals, North Las Vegas, Henderson, just to ensure that even if we had a copycat or somebody else wanted to go up and conduct an attack, that we have the appropriate and available resources to handle it.
Have you all found any devices inside the Cybertruck that could have been used to set off those explosives?
No, the question is, did we find any devices that would be used to set off the explosives? And the answer is no, I don't know how they were ignited. Clearly, with what you see in there, something set them off, but I don't know what it was yet. We haven't been able to process the vehicle yet.
Has LVMPD been in contact with Tesla Code to get the analytics from the vehicle, cameras?
Yes, actually, I have to thank Elon Musk specifically. He gave us quite a bit of additional information in regards to how the vehicle was locked after it exploded due to the force of the nature of the force from the explosion, as well as being able to capture all of the video from the Tesla charging stations across the country, and he sent that directly to us, so I appreciate his help on that. I'll take one more question.
Elon Musk is claiming that this
I'm sorry, you got to speak up for me.
Elon Musk is saying this vehicle and the vehicle in New Orleans were rented from the same company. Has there been any other indication that these two events might be associated?
It's another. The question is Both vehicles, I'm being told New Orleans was rented from Toro, and so was ours. That's another coincidence that absolutely is continuing to bear from our investigation that we have to continue to look into. So thank you very much, and as we get additional information for all of you, I'm sorry, I'll give you a shout.
Are investigators using any of these city license plate readers this evening?
That's the question is, are we using the license plate readers and the technology? Well, one, you see the drone flight through the vehicle because it was unsafe to get there, so that we're using that technology. Thankful to have it, as well as the first indication of that vehicle arriving here in Las Vegas came from a license plate reader. So technology has been very useful to us in resolving this. And again, I'll commit to come back to you all when we have confirmation of the suspect's name, who they are, what their background is. We will get that information back out to you. We'll call another press conference and provide it. And I'd just like to, again, thank the mayor, the commissioners, the other law enforcement leaders, and, of course, our attorney general for showing up and supporting us in this event. It's been a statewide effort, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
We've been listening to a briefing from the police chief in Las Vegas, Nevada, who basically is asking the same question all of us are asking. Is the explosion of a cyber truck outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas connected with the deadly terror attack in New Orleans that cost 15 lives and sent dozens of others for treatment? Basically, his answer is they're looking at it, that it's obviously something that crosses everyone's minds. Let me bring in Tom Winter right now, who covers law enforcement for us. Tom, let's talk about that question. What evidence is there that points in either direction here?
Sure. Well, Sheriff Kevin McMahill, who gave that press conference there in Las Vegas because of the high-profile incidents that they or high-profile events that they typically handle in that city, but also one of the worst mass shootings in American history that occurred at a country music concert several years ago. They have a lot of experience with these type of high-profile cases. You heard it there. The common link here, Lester, is that there is a company called Toro, which basically allows you to put your car out there and make it available for somebody else to use. So it would be no different than if I had a car here in New York City and said, well, I'm leaving with the family for 2 weeks, Lester, but if you need my car, you can borrow it. This is different in that it's actually a commercial service. So it's similar to the types of vacation rental property services that are so popular out there, like Airbnb, VRBO, same type of idea that's here. It's the same company in the same type of rental that occurred in both the New Orleans incident and the incident in Las Vegas. That's the common evidentiary tie between the two. Outside of that, no law enforcement official has told myself or our colleagues here at NBC News that there's any sort of evidentiary tie between the two, other than, of course, both took place on the same day, the same date. So that's the only evidentiary link between them. Whether or not there's other information that has come up, we've been told so far preliminarily, it's the belief in law enforcement officials who've been briefed on both investigations. They don't see a tie at this point, but obviously these investigations are ongoing. The video that was played at the press conference shows the idea of these fireworks set up as kind of like mortars. We heard earlier in the broadcast the actual sound of the fireworks going off, no different than you would hear on the 4th of July, and that there was gasoline and fuel that was included in this. The fact that it occurred in the bed, which is generally open and exposed on that truck, allowed the explosion not to be contained. And that's something that an actual explosive device that works in a stronger manner needs. It needs the ability to be contained without giving people too many ideas on how to make an explosive device out of their vehicle. So that's something that will be looked at. What was the ultimate goal here? Clearly, according to the sheriff, he was able to actually talk to Elon Musk, who, of course, runs Tesla and a number of other companies and is working with President-elect Trump to get information. The Tesla car absorbs so much data, where it was charged, where it's been, all sorts of information about what occurs inside the vehicle and the way that it's operated. It's really an investigative landmine for these individuals. Then you heard about a blanket that was used to put the fire out there, Lester. Electric vehicles generally have reaction when firefighters apply water to them to be able to put out a fire. So in fact, what occurs is they try to put a blanket over it to suffocate the fire effectively, take away its oxygen source, and then stop the flames from going on from there. That's something that law enforcement typically uses, and apparently was what they used here to stop the fire. But to your ultimate question, are we looking at two linked events today, one involving a high-profile incident that is ISIS-inspired in New Orleans, and another involving a property that bears the name of the president-elect in a vehicle driven by one of his top advisors, frankly, at this point, if not in name, then in actuality. That's something that nobody has pointed to yet, but clearly they're asking questions about, given the fact that both of these events took place on the same day.
Okay, Tom, thanks very much. I want to turn now to Gabe Gutierrez, who's following the president, who made some remarks just a short time ago, speaking in solidarity with the people of New Orleans and updating us with some new information on the investigation. Gabe?
Oh, hi there, Lester. Yes, President Biden a short time ago at Camp David addressing the public for his first lengthy remarks since the attack in New Orleans earlier today. He also mentioned that he was being briefed on that attack in Las Vegas, although he didn't share much information there. He called the attack in New Orleans a despicable attack, and he said that top officials at the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security had briefed him throughout the day. Now, Lester, as you said, one of the major questions at this point regarding the Las Vegas attack, as you said, is was it an isolated incident, and was there any connection between that Tesla Cybertruck, which that company owned by Elon Musk, and President-elect Trump, the Trump Hotel? Now, we have not heard directly from the Trump transition about that attack in Las Vegas. Eric Trump, the president-elect's son, did share a statement earlier today saying that his thoughts were with the guests of the hotel and also thanking the local police department for responding, but we have yet to hear from the president-elect himself about that incident in Las Vegas. We did hear from the president-elect, who is here in South Florida. He spent part of the day at his international golf club. Tonight he's at Mar-a-Lago. He did comment briefly on a social media post earlier today about the incident in New Orleans, saying that his heart went out to the victims, and he pledged that his administration would go and would pledge as much support as it could to the city of New Orleans. Now, earlier, just a short time ago, again, President Biden calling this a despicable attack and saying that I grieve with you, again, striking that tone as consoler-in-chief. Now, Lester, the president also mentioning the detail about that ISIS flag on that truck, and just 19 days from the end of his presidency. Let's take a step back here, and the Biden administration has tried to make the case that its foreign policy has contributed to the diminishment of ISIS in the Middle East, and has also, with the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, the Biden administration has tried to make the case that its foreign policy contributed to that. Now, as this investigation continues and we hear whether the suspect in New Orleans may have been ISIS-inspired, the details of this attack certainly weighing on the president, but he is cautioning that the federal investigators will look into his motive. We do not have that specifically yet. But President Biden addressing the public in his first lengthy remarks, they lasted about 5 minutes or so at Camp David just a short time ago, Lester.
All right, thanks very much, Gabe Gutierrez. I'm going to turn back to Ken Delaney, our national security correspondent. Ken, not to belabor the point too much, but back to that explosion of a car, the cyber car in Las Vegas. What are your sources telling you about a possible connection, if only there was a general call for terror-type attacks?
That's right, Lester. So they're investigating that possibility. There are concerns about that, and as you just heard, or as Las Vegas police officers just said, too many coincidences here. The fact that this happened on the same day, but there doesn't appear to be concrete evidence linking the two events, but they are looking very hard, given the overall spate of coincidences, and as you said, the call for attacks and the concerns that ISIS ideology is resurging around the world.
Are there questions about how far this investigation will go, where it could lead beyond just, determining the who, what, when, and where?
Yeah, in terms of the New Orleans attack, Lester, this is really of grave concern to the counterterrorism officials I'm talking to. You know, it wasn't that long ago that experts and intelligence officials were saying the threat from Islamic terrorism around the world had receded. And of course, it was 5 years ago that the United States defeated the ISIS caliphate in Syria. But since then, the ISIS threat has morphed and grown more diffuse. That's the term that counterterrorism officials use. But the ideology hasn't gone away. And there continue to be ISIS-inspired attacks around the world and in the United States. But this is one of the biggest that we've seen really in the post-9/11 environment, and one of the most complex when you consider it was a vehicle-borne attack. We've seen those before. We've seen them in Germany and in New York City, of course, in 2017. But combined with the use of a gun to shoot police officers, and combined with the potential for bombs, for IEDs. That's a really complex attack that appeared to require some advanced planning. Again, they're not saying, they don't know whether this person had any accomplices or whether he acted alone. But either way, it's a really disquieting signal that the ISIS ideology continues to pose a threat to Americans, Lester.
All right, Ken Delaney, and certainly a difficult night for many Americans as we start a new year and look forward to so many things, and to be dragged back into the sad past of terrorism. A tough night. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com. For some, we'll head right to NBC Nightly News. For others, we'll see you a bit later on. I'm Lester Holt. Have a good evening.